Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another Friday edition of #AskRobCo. Hope you're all well wherever you are in the world. Love the fact that we get so many overseas international listeners live and also through all the other platforms afterwards when it gets downloaded. So thanks for joining on another Friday. For those of you who don't know how it works, we have a very special guest today, James Mcginley, and he's going to tell you about Scale Real Estate, his business that he's co-founded. And you're going to ask the questions to him or to me, and we are going to end Friday in a positive way so that you all have the best weekend possible. On the right hand side, you have the questions area. You type in the question and we will give you the answer. We are having some technical difficulties with James. James, are you there? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me. Yeah, having a bit of a nightmare with my webcam. It's sod's law. It always works when you don't want it to. It never works when you need it to. So it's one of those things. Okay.
As long as everyone can hear you and you get a beautiful message across, that is all that matters. So we are welcoming James Mcginley. He is the co-founder of Scale Real Estate, and he is going to tell us about his journey, his story, how he got to be where he is today, and what he's looking to do within the real estate and property industry moving forward. Welcome, James. The platform is yours. Tell us your story.
Yeah, thanks again, Rob. Yes, it's quite a simple story, really. There's not that much moving components. So I went to university in Portsmouth, where I graduated in 2012. I did a property degree. I didn't do the quantity surveying route. It was just a very blanket property development, Emirates associated degree. Again, graduated from there. Then I did a bit of a funny jump. I didn't actually jump straight into the property industry. I actually jumped into retail. And it was, reason for that was I worked part-time whilst I was at university in this retail. It was Abercrombie and Fitch. And I was sold the dream a little bit. So I was sold the manager in training program, to which I did for a year. And then, well, retail's in a worse state now, but I kind of realized quite quickly that was quite a, you would hit a roof quite quickly in that industry. So then I thought, why not actually follow something where it's actually relevant to the thing I studied at university? So then I started my property journey, and as with a lot of people when they finish university, and if you've done a stint in retail where the money isn't particularly great, I went into a estate agency. So I actually went back down to Portsmouth after I worked into London for a bit. I live in Surrey, so then I went back down to Portsmouth and then was an estate agent there, and then was there for a good 9 months, almost a year, and then I decided to venture back up into Surrey and carry on my estate agent journey. So then I became a valuer in the letting side of the estate agent world.
Whereabouts in Surrey?
Weybridge. So I was lucky to meet a lot of Chelsea football players in St John's Wood. So valued some of their place, not for selling, for rental, and then I would find the apps and prospect and find the right people to rent those properties, which was good. And then it took a bit of a different turn there, and it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. But I'm one of two. I'm one of a twin, and my twin actually started talking to someone in London on a night out about generally the commercial industry. And to put it very blankly, commercial industry is offices. So you've got retail, which is more like your front shop, high street, and then commercial is the office game. When I first thought of offices, I thought of kind of stuffy, kind of quite probably 1990s-esque, kind of like in there boxed in like chickens. That was my interpretation of the office world. And then once I made the intro with this through my brother with this guy, he was the head recruiter at a company called WeWork, and I went in and met him. I'm actually sat in a WeWork now, which is annoying that my camera's broken, because I'll give you a little quick 2-second tour of the view from the conference room that I'm in. But essentially what WeWork is, it's one of quite a few serviced offices in London, and they will take several floors or a whole building and they will kit it out in their own unique way. So the WeWork kind of angles for the entrepreneurial, I would say, industry, and it will divide up the floor into a load of little offices, and then you can take an office, you can take a floor, you can kind of take what you want. So it's kind of, you have an office to yourself, all the perks that come with an office, but you're not paying the huge price tag because you pay as you go and what you need on a daily basis, really. So worked at WeWork and then had a really good time at WeWork. I was there for 4 years and I got to UK sales manager. So kind of went between the major cities in the UK. And then I thought at the beginning of this time last year, actually almost exactly to the day, thought wanted to kind of change it up a little bit. So then I worked for a company called JLL. It's probably more of a recognizable brand, JLL. And I did the other side of the fence from WeWork. So then I would actually work with the companies and then review the offices, the serviced offices in London, and then move them to where the client would suit best. So I'd actually did quite a few WeWork deals at my time at JLL. So then from there, learned the industry, learned how it all works, and then thought, you know, as a lot of people during COVID, you reflect on your life, don't you? So you look what's going on, and then I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to start up a company with my best friend and twin brother, and that was the inception of Scale last July. Albeit we thought we were starting the company after lockdown 1, and then we've subsequently had a few more lockdowns, but it's going very well. I wouldn't take it back for the world. It's been the best move I've ever done, and it's work at your own pace, being your own boss is obviously amazing, and the industry is really starting to pick up. So everything's kind of marrying together now. So that's essentially my journey.
James, I do love your story, and it's you know, in respect to you, it's a pretty fast track version of my journey and what I've probably done in my 28 years in the industry. You've managed to do a lot in, I imagine, 6 or 7 years, depending on how my maths has worked out and in what you've just said. And so I think the first thing to understand, James, is where does your semi-itchy feet stroke change stroke wanting more stroke drive come from? Tell us about how you grew up, how you were parented in terms of, did you always work? Were you always creative? Tell us a bit about that so we can get into your mindset to understand how you've managed to fast track everything that probably took me 28 years, and you've managed to get through all of those things so quickly. Talk us through that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's obviously everything is rooted in your childhood. Obviously, having a twin brother adds to the competitiveness, but in a good way. I actually started, my first actual job was on a farm, so bit of a different mix there. So it's kind of driving tractors, then working in retail was a bit of a funny jump, and then moving into the serviced office. The reason for the pace is because the serviced office industry, not the office industry, the serviced office industry is such a fast moving, quick, agile way of what people are going to need. And especially because of this COVID situation, companies like your HSBCs are thinking work isn't going to be the same again. We can't have 500 people on one floor. We're going to have to try and rethink our portfolio, and we're going to have to adapt this serviced office mindset. So the reason for the rapid growth in the last year has almost been dictated by COVID, but in a good way. It's, I hate to say it, but COVID has made a lot of companies realize there's a lot better way. There's a lot better way of working. There's a lot more diversity. It's not an old school mindset anymore. So that's, if there's any positive to draw from COVID, it's made these large institutions and entrepreneurs alike realize this industry is probably the best way to kind of go forward in all aspects.
I see that with your business, and that's very clear that marketplace is massively being disrupted, and has been pre-COVID, and will be even more so post. So I get that, but with you, and your journey and your career from agency to major corporate to setting up a business and to qualifying, or everything you've done in your degree, sorry, you've really fast tracked that. And I'd like the listeners to understand that that's not a coincidence. It hasn't happened by chance. There is something within you, your mindset, your DNA, that has allowed you to be brave and not be scared of change. Can you talk through us with that? Because not everyone has the capacity to make the decisions that you, so by the sounds of it, were able to make quite easily. Talk us through how that's played out.
It's that marry up between, as you said, change and also the risk element. So I think with a lot of people, working your 9 to 5 on a salary is like the kind of the end goal, and then climb up in, say, JLL, Knight Frank, CBRE, wherever, to kind of, their mindset was to join it maybe at grad level. So there's probably people here that might be looking at those big four industries, those companies, but that's never hugely appealed to me, chasing that partner dream or associate director or director dream. I've always, job title's never been a huge be all and end all for me. So I just kind of go with what I enjoy most. I never really appealed to me being a manager and managing 5 people. I like being on the ground and then doing the sales and actually meeting the people face to face. So then when I started thinking of that, and I didn't really want to follow the managerial route, what's the most successful I can be while still doing kind of the thing I love doing on a day-to-day basis, which is checking out new offices, meeting new clients, trying to help companies at the end of the day. And the answer to that was start my own company and make my own kind of like brand, essentially. Never to slate WeWork and JLL, they did great things for me and they taught me loads, but it's the entrepreneurial side of it. Also, my brother was a big aspect of it because he was a huge driver and he wanted to go. So I'd say, in terms of the change, I actually relish change. The thing I liked about WeWork was you're almost given a different brief every month, so you really had to adapt to that. And my brother was very much behind this own company direction, and also my parents weren't like, oh, it's going to be too much of a risk, essentially, like you got to pay your rent. So it's that kind of the comfort from the parents and the relatives, and then the kind of probably my ADHD wanted to kind of make me race forward and still do the things that I've learned and got good at, but then use it in a capacity where I can get like the most return in terms of customer satisfaction.
Great, I love that, James. And just to share with you, at the age of 16, I stopped education and got a summer intern in agency, like you, estate agency. Did some lettings, did some management, did some sales, bit of resi, bit of commercial. Then I did a degree, a building surveying degree. I was at Westminster working, and then I was very fortunate and got my position at CBRE, and then I worked with ExxonMobil, one of the biggest petrol companies in the world, and I got great experience at CBRE with multinationals as well. And then MJ Group was set up, and 15 years later, we are a beautiful, independent, pan-European major valuer within the commercial and residential industry, both lending, finance, banks, institutions, and funds. So I really resonate with your journey so far, James, because it has been a virtual mirror of my journey, and I love hearing those stories. And you've just done it at scale and a lot quicker, which is great. And it's great for the audience to hear as well that there's no right way or wrong way of doing something, and you just got to go out there and do it. So I'm very familiar, and we've got questions coming through, so we're going to hit the questions in a couple of minutes. And thank you for everyone that sent the questions so far. Keep sending them through. We're going to get through them. So I'm very familiar with your sector and your niche and your specialism. And I think it is important to have a niche and a specialism, because when you do have that, and you can go very deep and very narrow in that niche and that specialism, when you do have your own business, you can really leverage off that and use your own USP and leverage off all the clients and the connections and relationships you built whilst working at Jones Lang and WeWork. That market space is massively disrupted now. So if I had to give my opinion and view, I see the future being very challenging for WeWork in that space, as an example, because they would have paid high rents to get the buildings that they didn't own and secure, to then have to charge even higher rents to make their margin, which is very small but works at scale and volume across the world. Now, I imagine they're going to have to renege a lot of terms, because if they don't, they will not get the kind of premium rents that they were previously getting, because there's so much stock on the market and the outlook for business is so different. Let me know your view and perspective on that, and tell me where I could be right or I could be wrong.
Well, you're absolutely right. In terms of WeWork, so before I left, I would actually look over the new acquisitions. And for people that kind of generally know about WeWork's journey, the pace of which they grew was astonishing, and they were spending about £300,000 a day. I know they're going to release something on Apple TV, so it'd be interesting to see how they document that. But you're completely right. Because of the nature of WeWork, they would deem to be risky by landlords. So they'd actually pay over the asking, and they'll be outside the act, and they would take these no breaks on 20-year leases. So what's happened now that those 2-year rent frees have come into an end, they need to run their buildings at over 50% occupancy to actually have that revenue stream. So now as they fall underneath 30, that essentially that asset is become negative. So they've actually using CBRE, funnily enough, to renegotiate their older leases and either give it to another serviced office provider, which would be a huge hit to the ego, or to surrender the lease. So WeWork are probably going to be the worst affected, because as you said, they only own 2 assets in London. They only own 2 buildings. The other 38 they don't. So then now that becomes a different conversation whether they can keep them all up and running. I'm in a building now which is 40% occupied, and 20% of that is an anchor tenant called Cisco. So now if Cisco hand the keys back and their rent is up in November, this building is going to be in danger. So let's see how they react. I think there is going to be a knee-jerk reaction where people are going to be moving out of lease. So I'd be interested to see what you think about that. But it's going to be a very interesting year. I think WeWork always did been under the spotlight because their IPO disaster and everything surrounding having been a CEO like Adam Newman obviously made loads of headlines. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months. I think WeWork will turn cash positive in November. That's kind of been circulated by the now CFO, but we'll see. They always will inflate those figures.
Yeah, I just, from the outside, and obviously I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but using the fundamentals of real estate investment, modeling returns, rents, yields, I believe it is going to be one of the most enviable tasks to get that ship moving in the right direction. And I will be very, very, very surprised if they get over the line, because I just think the model is now flawed. And because the model is flawed and the ship is so big, I see it as the challenge of all challenges. And if there is a human being that has the capacity to turn that ship around and recreate or innovate that historic model, that that's going to be some kind of Houdini act. So I'd love to see in a year or 2 years and get you back on, see where we are with that. I'm fascinated by it. Moving on to scale, again, having heard your story and your journey, if there's ever an amazing opportunity in time to be a disruptor in that space and to go really deep and really narrow and really niche and provide an incredible service to clients, this has got to be the greatest moment in the last 100 years to be doing that. And if you're not already aware, James, this is the opportunity of all opportunities for you, and you probably shouldn't be sleeping for the next 10 years of your life as you scale to becoming one of the niche boutique specialists in the serviced office and office space market.
Yeah, it's going to be big, and only as soon as this week, bear in mind we've been running from last summer, this week has been the biggest indicator of what the next 5 years is going to bring. So we had this morning actually a company come to us, we've got 2 brands actually that come to us, and everyone will know who they are. I unfortunately can't say, but they're looking to take 8,000 square foot between them to take a whole building, which is just, it shows you the confidence that companies are thinking, especially with London, to come back into London. And there's even talks to make kind of your Spitalfields Old Street area the new tech capital of the world and take it away from San Francisco. So London's got a big spotlight at the moment on it. So I think you're completely right. I think the next 10 years to 15 years is going to be nothing but growth.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I've chosen a good time to jump in.
Definitely, you're in a wonderful space. All right, let's get through the questions. So we might carry over for 5 minutes if that's all right, James. Let's get through these. So question 1, why did you work for 4 years JLL and then change? And then the second question to that is, did you get an offer through formal interviews for wherever you went to, or was it informal that you knew someone to get in? So 2 questions there.
Yeah, so the 4 years at WeWork, that was done through actually quite a strict recruitment process. So it was 4 interviews, just because, one, I got very lucky, but I joined WeWork when it was only opening its 2nd building in London, and the recruitment process was quite an American style. So the first 3 were via Zoom. I know that's probably more normal now that there's social distancing. And then I would go in for a trial day and then started working at WeWork. And then half my job at WeWork was dealing with the large deals who were brought by agents. So I would deal with the head of sales at CBRE, JLL, Knight Frank. So then for me to get a job at JLL was quite easy because the person that was trying to recruit me, we had done deals together to take space in WeWork itself. So I'd essentially kind of proven my ability to him by working kind of with him in a capacity to sell offices with him. So
did you think that was a strange move going from WeWork to JLL? Because that's kind of like the question that the audience is asking. Is that a backwards move, or is that the move that has allowed you to be where you are today?
It's the move. It's probably the correct move in terms of my story, because I always knew I was going to open up my own brokerage, but I had never worked as a broker. So at WeWork, I would only sell obviously the WeWork product, but there's 100 office products out there when you get a client and when you're trying to get them into offices. So my rationale behind it was jump to JLL, which is obviously a very known company, learn how brokerage is generally done of those guys and stuff I don't know, get some skills, and then make my own brokerage. But your listeners are right. There is also a big jump from your CBREs and your JLLs and Knight Franks to jump into the WeWorks and the office groups companies. I would say that was more normal than the other way around.
I love that you were already thinking that, because I share with everyone on this show every week that when you go to CBRE, Knight Frank, Jones Lang, Cushman, they are the best universities and educators in planet Earth for property and the real estate industry. Fact, they are the best. And so if you're open-minded enough, like you have clearly demonstrated, to understand that you're going there to be educated and to learn, then why wouldn't you go to the biggest and best company in the world to do that, like Jones Lang?
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
so you were aware of that and you understood that, which is brilliant. And what I'm trying to share with everyone is you're not always going there to earn money or to get a wage. There's something much bigger and greater than that.
Yeah, definitely. The two other co-founders actually. So I was JLL and WeWork. My other co-founder Tom was at Cushman for 8 years, and then my brother Jack was at Knight Frank for 6 years. And Tom had worked up through the graduate program into Cushman. And you're completely right. And because these companies are so vast, if you was to join in the team that you're in, like the leasing side, and it's not completely for you. I've got a friend that did that for 2 years. Now he's actually working in the head of hotels, and then he opens up hotels outside the M25. So there's these companies you learn so much from, and then there's so many avenues, and you can go as niche as you want on these avenues to find a department that works for you inside these huge companies. And generally speaking, they probably CBRE is the best example, but their staff retention is insane. Like, people have come from CBRE to WeWork for a year, and then they've jumped back into CBRE. So that kind of speaks to itself that once you're in and you're climbing, that it is very good.
When I'm with all of students, graduates, young professionals, I share with them exactly what you've just said. I was very lucky. I learned prime, super prime at CBRE. I learned petrol filling stations, roadside at CBRE, very, very specialist areas. And when you work at a company like that, you work with the biggest company on planet Earth, whether it's WeWork or SO, ExxonMobil in my example, or Deutsche Bank, UBS, the biggest banks in the world from a valuation perspective. You get an opportunity that you might not get somewhere else. And then what you do with your specialism and niche, like James is sharing with us, is down to you. Whether you stay there, great. Whether you do something yourself, also great. No right, no wrong, whatever is best for you. So on the back of that, I always struggled having a boss or being told what to do. And I was very lucky in my 28-year journey that my bosses allowed me the freedom to produce and create and do what I want within the systems that I worked in. So I was really lucky because I was always challenged to actually do what someone told me to do. Did you experience that? And is that why you are where you are today?
Yeah, so just referencing WeWork and JLL, because the two couldn't be more different. So at WeWork, because the company was so new and there was obviously so much money involved, it was, if I'm honest, it was a little bit headless chickens for the first 4 years. So I joined 2 years after the company inception. So you didn't really have, the people that would acquire the buildings didn't necessarily have a agency background, and they would offer people, like, they'd offer landlords over rent, and it was a little bit, let's make it up as we go along aspect to it, like that kind of entrepreneurial side, and that's what they fed off. So in terms of my manager there, he was great. We kind of grew, we kind of learned the business and the industry together. And then he went on his own journey. He's actually essentially started up his own thing. And then when I jumped into JLL, obviously it's a completely different story, but it has its benefits because my boss, Dan, he had done the whole graduate journey himself, and it kind of ties into that retention. So they've walked the journey. They know what it's like to be at that junior level. So there's no unrealistic expectations there, as there was at WeWork. So JLL, it's a polished system. They've done it for years. They've done it well. And a lot of people that joined in graduates are now in some very senior seats, regardless if they have MRICS qualifications. The person that runs agency in London doesn't have the qualification that you really need to be that level. It's just he organically grew. So it's definitely two different sides of the coin. WeWork was a bit manic, but great fun, learned a lot. JLL, very established. Everyone knew you weren't overbeared with information. I've known a lot of graduates which have grown up through the company. I actually joined at associate director level at JLL, and then I was still given a lot of leeway and time to kind of start working my way, if that makes sense. They know that everyone's different and that everyone's got a different style and selling, so they kind of let you do that, especially in the flexible office industry. In these agencies, let you do that.
Last two questions, James.
Yep.
The first one is, has the recent Hart versus Large Court of Appeal judgment had any effect on your business? Probably more directed at me than you, James, but feel free if you want to comment on it. If not, I will.
No, you go for it.
So thanks for that question. It's a really good question. The answer to it is yes. It has an impact in the sense that everyone has to be more wary, more careful, do their job to a very high degree of professionalism. And if there are any delapse or any issues within property that you inspect, whether you're doing home buyers, building survey valuation, you should be raising that and making that very clear so that the person that is buying, the purchaser, the borrower or the bank, can then take further specialist advice to understand what the implications and the costs are because of that. So you wouldn't have changed the way you work. It just highlights how important it is to do your job and make aware of any issues or delapse that you see when you're doing your inspection. So great question there. James, have you observed any significant impact on the London office market resulting from Brexit? And is such an increased office supply and now possibly a reduced demand? So demand and supply, Brexit.
Big, yeah, there's been big difference. So the biggest one to probably flag, and this again ties into, it benefits me. So the general office market is split up essentially between two segments, lease and serviced. So I've obviously kept flying the flag for service for this whole chat. Lease has been the only way since offices began, and this serviced model and managed model has only really come into play for the last, I would say, 5-8 years with kind of Regis. And the biggest shift you get is when things like Brexit, COVID, the big uncertainty things happen to kind of shake the market. Then people think, oh, I'm not going to tie into a 10-year lease because I don't know where my company's going to be in 2 years. I'm going to take an office for a year. And by that definition, they go to serviced because you can't take a lease for shorter than 3 years. So there's been a huge shift. Brexit was actually quite a big shift. It was bigger than everyone was expecting, but just to kind of put some maths behind it, the leasing market represents 95% of the space in the office industry in London, and serviced, bear in mind there's loads of companies doing this, only represent 5%. And the prediction from Savills is that shift in the next 5 years is going to go more 20% serviced to 80% leased, and then it's going to keep going in that direction until it's, I would say, even 50-50. So that's been the biggest huge shift. Things like WeWork have completely mixed things up. They've made landlords and industries having to really adapt to their lifestyle and the way they do things. And it's kind of, for better or worse, it's completely changed the industry, and it's made a spotlight on the industry. So yeah, there's been some big differences, but Brexit was a huge indicator. COVID has been a big indicator, but more of an indicator from companies and how they're going to deal with reduced workflow, like they're not having social distancing, things like that. They don't need 1 million square foot in London. They might only need 100,000 square foot in London, how that's going to play out. So yeah, it's been the fastest moving market, which is something I relish on. So it's benefited myself.
Brilliant. James, I love your story, love your journey. I'm going to keep an eye on you, see where you're going, and obviously reach out if you need any help, support, mentorship, happy to guide. We always like on a Friday to leave everyone in a positive place. What message would you like to share with the audience, and what impact do you want to have on the world moving forward?
Yeah, good question, and happy Friday, everyone. I don't actually think I said that, but I think, and I know the press is going to release, or always will be, a bit doom and gloom on the articles that they publish, but I think we're on now the roads to recovery and normality. And I think once we kind of get out of this COVID situation, which everyone's a bit pent up and fed up with now, I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. And I think that might be as soon as May. So I'm looking forward to going back to my parents' house and giving my mum a hug after almost a year. I think we're almost at the end of it, and I think every industry is going to boom. And I think everyone's going to be happy. It's going to be like post World War II, everyone just celebrated for 2 years. So I think that's my view. And then I want to be part of that wave. So I want to help companies like myself mostly. So my aim is to help companies which are like 5 people to 10 people, find them the best offices I can, and then when they grow, I'll grow with them and keep finding them really good places in London to stay for 6 months or a year or whatever they want to do. My office that I'm in now is a ping pong table, beer taps, and a pool table. So the service industry kind of lends to that kind of funness. So that's kind of my direction. I think upwards and onwards. We've had a year of COVID. Now let's have a year of partying.
Brilliant, James. Love your positivity. Love your journey so far. Absolutely agree. Let's get through the final stages of COVID. Let's get out of this in a really positive way. Let's have a really good economy, industry, life, world. Let's move on, and let's really try to embrace the opportunities that we've been given and be grateful for life as we hopefully will know and will return post-COVID. So love that, James. You've been a brilliant guest. I'm so excited to have heard your story, and I'm even more excited to see where your journey takes you. So thanks for that, James.
Thank you so much. I'll be on again, and I'll hopefully have my webcam working next time.
Definitely.
I want to give you a tour of the office.
We'll definitely have you back. And to the audience, thank you for your brilliant questions. Thank you for your continued support on all of the platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Clubhouse, Twitter, wherever you are. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for your messages. I'm super grateful. Have a great weekend, and we will see you same time, same place next Friday, 1 p.m. #AskRobCo. We will see you then. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.